Welcome, everyone, to Friday 15. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoar and our master B2B community. We're here for our weekly Friday 15 podcast, LinkedIn Live, all the rest. We got a great topic we're going to be talking about today. But Andy, welcome. Happy to be here with you on a Friday.
Yeah, we're battling the wildfires here in the Midwest. They're not burning our houses down, but we got this Canadian stuff pouring across the border, and it's like the air quality is really bad. So it feels like LA here today.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we've dealt with that so many times here. It's frustrating, but yep. Okay. Well, our weather is nice and overcast. But anyhow, let's get into our breaking news, Andy. We got some really interesting stuff that's been happening. All about Amazon. Walmart officially allows Amazon MCF, that's multi-channel fulfillment. What sellers need to know. This was on Geek Seller. And what's fascinating here is, so multi-channel fulfillment is a service that Amazon provides that allows companies to utilize their FBA, fulfillment by Amazon service, on their own websites or for orders placed through other websites. In this case now, Walmart is saying it's okay. You can use Amazon MCF, multi-channel fulfillment, for orders placed on Walmart's website for their marketplace. But with conditions, right, Andy? No logos on boxes, no Amazon logos on boxes. You have to choose a non-branded option, and you can only use USPS, UPS, and FedEx. Amazon Prime is prohibited. Okay, so what's the freaking point? Anyway, that's just my opinion. Go ahead, Andy. What do you think?
Well, I find this fascinating for two reasons. One is apparently if you did this before, if Walmart ever caught you doing this, you were banned forever. It was a lifetime
Right.
ban. So
Right.
that's a pretty major concession. The other thing is, this is going to affect billions of dollars in shipments, maybe tens of billions of dollars shipment, and over time, maybe even as high as $1 trillion, right? This is a big piece of news. Why did it not break through beyond kind of like obscure blogs and industry trade
Right.
journals? I
Right.
mean, when we read about this, my jaw fell. Like, this is a big deal. And yet it only floated. I mean, look at the name of the site, Geek Seller. Why wasn't this in the Wall Street Journal? Why wasn't this on Bloomberg? I
Right.
mean, it's really having that kind of impact, but I guess it's an inside baseball thing, but it's a big inside baseball thing.
Well, it's fascinating to me, but I mean, look, my opinion on this is why bother allowing it unless you're going to actually allow it. I mean, if you're not allowing Amazon Prime, that's the whole value of multi-channel fulfillment, quite frankly. And Amazon has moved away from they're shipping on their own vehicles, they're doing all their own infrastructure these days. UPS, FedEx, USPS only ship a small portion of these orders. So I'm sorry, this just doesn't work. And so I don't even know why they would bother making it available, to be honest with you. But it's going to be interesting to see. Now it's an interesting dynamic because it is Walmart, right? So we'll keep our eye on that, folks. It's a continued e-commerce battle for dominance here, but the reality is Amazon's just really good at fulfillment. So our topic today is, how do you select an SI, systems integrator, partner? Andy, last week we talked a lot about the pros and cons of different approaches of, platform first, partner first. What do you select first when you're building a new e-commerce foundation for your B2B company? And it was interesting. We found that a lot of people were leaning towards platform first, right? Hey, we should select that and then select the partner afterwards, which ran in the face of conventional sort of wisdom and approaches where, we still, you and I still agree, I think, that the partner first is sort of a better approach if you have one or the other to choose from, because the partner can, help you select the platform essentially, right? What were some of the pros and cons we found for the partner first?
Yeah, I mean, one is that you want to start with a blank slate, and a partner's a better one to start with because a platform, by definition, is not a blank slate. There's one platform, and that's the one you're going to use.
Right. Right.
On the negative side, there was a lot of talk, and this harkens back to the interview that I did with Mariana Gomid from VTEX, that there's some distrust there of SIs.
Right.
And to use the classic phrase, they feel like the SIs are running up the bill,
Yep.
and that they have no incentive to simplify things, but rather make things complex. And I think that's kind of worn down a lot of practitioners who've been through this for a while. So there's some scar tissue there that companies need to worry about. But you and I still believe, despite all that, the better, first step in theory is to choose a partner.
Yeah.
because there are more benefits than there are costs associated with that. So the pros outweigh the cons. But then it begged the question, which is why we're doing this week's Friday 15 on this topic.
Yeah.
How do you select a partner?
No, exactly. But even if you do, here's the thing, Andy, even if you do pick the platform first, you still have to figure out how to select the partner, because the platform's going to come in and say, well, hey, my e-commerce platform has a set of, sort of approved or partner SIs, systems integrators, that do work on their platform. And, even if you're presented with those options, should you just accept those options? No, not necessarily. You really need to vet what the, how to select a partner. So, and this is tough, right? I mean, this is something that, going back to your days, all the way at Forrester, Andy, you tried to kind of analyze partners, right? I mean, you did we got the Wayback Machine up here. We look back at the Forrester Wave, the 2015 Global Commerce Service Providers, written by Mr. Andy Hoar 10 years ago. Tell us about this report. It was hard to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, so my former colleague and friend Adam Silverman, who's now at Pipe 17, he and I were encouraged to take a look at this. And SIs was the wrong term then. It's probably still the wrong term now, because it's a space that includes consultants,
Yep.
systems integrators, agencies, etc. So there was this term that actually we inherited called global commerce service providers. I think Brian Walker may have come up with this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, nobody knew what the hell that was, but hey, there's no term for it anyway, so let's just use it. We developed 77 criteria, which is a
Whoa.
long list, because we kept grasping for what separates these companies. And what we realized was there's no product,
Right.
it's people. It's a bit like looking at a team and saying, okay,
Right.
the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, who's better? Well, the
Right.
product is whoever's on the team. Take out a few players and everything changes.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really hard to do. I think we did a pretty good job of it. And I think we hit trajectory or directionally correct things. But I remember one thing that really highlighted it for me, and it was that 3 companies gave me the same company as a reference.
Right.
It was Harrods. I'll
Right.
never forget it. It was Harrods. One company had used them before, had been their SI. Another one was currently their SI, and the other one was in the process of becoming the SI. So
Right.
technically, they were all correct,
Right.
but I knew then we had a problem when 3 companies were giving us literally the same person. So
It's
it
insane.
took a lot of effort together, but it helped me develop an appreciation for how hard this is. That said, there
Yeah.
are some kind of key insights and key selection criteria that you and I have come to, and also I came to with Adam, 10 years ago. It's hard to believe it was 10 years ago. And so we made a list of about 6 of them. And one is industry track record.
Right.
It's really critical that the SI have experience in the industry. It doesn't
Yes.
matter if they're great in another industry. A lot of the stuff's not applicable in B2B, because there are a lot of nuances about each industry. I think you had this impression too, right?
Totally did. And I think in B2B, you also have to think about the nuances of your industry. So a lot of SIs, systems integrators, have done a lot of work in consumer products. And, you need that consumer sort of lens into as it comes to user interface and things like that, UI design, UX. But there's so much complexity as it relates to workflows and, all the things that are, the buyer journey in B2B is definitely different. And as you think about differences and nuances in different industries, Andy, if you're automotive versus aerospace versus chemicals versus metals versus building materials, these are all, if you're selling concrete into a job site, right, that's very different than someone selling a pneumatic tool and components for a pneumatic tool, which is more straightforward e-commerce. So industry track record, understanding the nuances of that industry, even down to the specific category of B2B you're in, we think is a very important one. The next one we talked about was technology focus, right, and capabilities. And a technology focus, and this is your, kind of your world these days, Andy, with Paradigm. When I think about this, I'm not only thinking about the platform, but I'm really thinking about my ecosystem, my ERP, my PIM, my CRM, the different systems I have in place, and what experience does that company have in, between the, say they're implementing an e-com platform, between that and these systems with my ecosystem of systems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think this to me is the analogy of it's like trying to find a doctor with a specialty. Can you
Right.
get a specialist who's not good at their job? Yes. Can you get a generalist who's very good at their job but not a specialist? Yes. In a perfect world, you want a strong specialist. And so I think these two are very related. You want somebody who's worked in your environment. You want somebody who has experience on a platform. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but all things being equal, if you're going to be implementing, let's say SAP, you want somebody who's implemented SAP before. That said, you can get people who've done it poorly. So again, it's not a deal breaker, but I think in a perfect world, you want them
Yeah.
to have some experience.
So my optometrist shouldn't be doing my heart surgery. Is that what you're saying, Andy?
That's right.
What about the platform? I mean, that's another thing, right? You want them to have deep experience on the actual e-com platform, right?
Yeah, but those, I must admit, the platforms are changing pretty rapidly. I mean, the SAP from 5 years ago is not the SAP from today. It's just these companies. Salesforce from 5 years ago is 3 companies different now. I mean, yes, I think it's important, but fundamentally, that's not a deal breaker. That moves you up the learning curve faster.
Right.
But if you're not good at it, who cares? You're just farther along at being not good at something. I think the next one, personally, is the most important one, which is cultural fit.
Mhm.
This is one that can sync everything.
Yep.
And you probably had this experience before. If they just operate in different ways, I mean, if one is very communicative and the other one's not, it's going to fall apart. If one is has very experienced people who understand your industry and understand how you operate, and the other one
Yep.
doesn't, it's going to fall apart. So I think this one's underdone, and that's what we're going to talk about in a moment about how we select. There's a lot of focus on that.
Yeah, I think, so that one is key because there's always things that go wrong. Always things that go wrong. There's always unexpected scope. And so when you think about another selection criteria here, the size of the systems integrator, how big are they? How much depth do they have? Can they handle new challenges that come up? That's another key criteria. And then, of course, the last one we kind of highlighted here in our list is about budget, pricing, cost. That's another criteria. I mean, obviously, they have to be, it has to be, fit within something you can actually afford. I mean, the price of an Accenture or Deloitte is much different than the price of a mid-market SI, for example. And,
But
and,
there's
and
a
there,
surprise coming up about this one, which we'll talk about in a moment.
yes, in fact, we got a nice bit of input from Jacoby. You pronounce his last name, Andy, at
I'm not doing it. You do it. I just call him Jacoby.
Zach Zersky,
Mr. Jacoby.
Mr. Sorry, Jacoby, man. That's your last name is impossible. He's a VP of Tech and Strategy at Luminos Labs, which is an SI. But then also he was for a long time VP of IT at Crescent Electric, which is a big electrical products distributor. And he highlighted a few things which were interesting along these lines. Andy, what did he say?
Yeah, so we asked him because we posted this. He weighed in and said, "Hey, it's an interesting kind of." I think he said it depends on precedents. And I said, "Well, tell us more."
Right.
And so he shared some ideas here, and some are consistent with what we had, like the technical fit. He said you need that proven experience on similar projects, not exact, but similar in the nature of the complexity. The complexity is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't highlight that in our list, but
Yeah.
if they don't have a lot of experience with complex projects,
Mm-hmm.
if it's always just one and done, in and out, that's not the same as kind of bearing down and really digging in.
Right.
He said problem-solving mindset. Now, this actually sounds like a no-brainer, but it's true that with your partner, you want them at your side. And if the first sign of a snag, they bail or they say it's too hard, then you're screwed. And so he said we want people who lean into speed bumps. He also said joint delivery is really important. This isn't, these people become an extension of the team. They're not outsiders. And so this is like a cultural fit. If they don't get along, like if they're, coastal people hanging out with Midwestern people or vice versa, they just don't see eye to eye. They don't have the
Isn't that
same.
what's happening here?
That's right. And that's it leads to this tension, right? No,
Thanks.
if it's just not going to work, it's not going to work. And
Right.
then he had a hot take at the end where he said he thinks it's important to keep the tech decisions decoupled from the P&L. He said when an SI only pitches based on how much they can grow top line or profit margins instead of engineering merit, red flag. So
That's interesting that he said that. Really interesting, because you think about it, this stuff has to tie to a business case. But yeah, I mean, his point is this is a technical, in-depth, deep working relationship project, right? And so, and I will echo that. Having been a VP of ecom who replatformed 6 times over my tenure and almost 20 years, you have to have that cultural fit, that joint delivery mentality with your SI. They become part of your team. And if they're not, that is probably the most important thing of any of these, because you're going to hit speed bumps. It's going to happen. What happens when you hit those speed bumps, right? So that's so sorry, you had something to add there?
no,
Go
no,
ahead.
no. Let's say, but so we had our own opinion on this. We put it out there. Jacoby had
Yes.
some really good advice. And then we actually asked our community, and this was a surprise. So, what
Yes.
is the most important characteristic when selecting a systems integration partner for a B2B e-commerce platform implementation? Number one was industry focus, 50%. Not surprising. I think that's important. Jacoby
Yep.
mentioned that as well. Cultural fit was number two at 29%. Technical knowledge, 21%. Budget/price is zero. Nobody cared about that. Now, we all know that's not true, but
Right.
it is interesting that, when arrayed against these other things, the budget and the price doesn't matter as much. And I think that kind of makes sense because you could save a bunch of money and do a poor job.
Well,
But we
I
saved
think,
money.
yeah, I think it also speaks to the fact that, again, having done this quite a few times, that at the end of the day, if you're doing this process right, you do have a lot of different SI options. You have there's partners, there's multiple partners that are in the marketplace. So the other factors, so you can't fully take price and budget out of the equation, but you can almost assume that if you're doing this well and you have multiple options, price becomes less of a factor because you can negotiate, you have leverage, right? I mean, these are services that are, that can be, they're not commoditized, but they shouldn't be. If you're picking the right partner, they should be unique and non-commodity. But at the end of the day, there is some commoditization here in the sense that what you should pay. The market's well established for this, right?
Well,
So,
and are the prices going to be that different? I
right,
mean,
yeah,
at the
right,
end of the day, this
exactly,
stuff equilibrates. It ends up being probably in a range. So
yeah,
it's not like there's a really cheap alternative that can, like a SaaS based platform versus the old on-prem platform. That doesn't exist here.
yep. So let's talk about just a couple recommendations as we wrap up here. And I like that Andy put this deck together we're looking at. For those of you who can see it, he's got the little Facebook recommended there. I think that's Facebook, isn't it? Looks like it. So a little icon. So
Because me, I'm all about Facebook.
yeah, yeah, you're learning to use the interweb. That's good, Andy. So what are some of these thoughts? Well, I mean, knowing your vision and strategy going in, right? I think you have to really understand what you're trying to get out of this. Ultimately, this does need to tie to business goals. Do your diligence, do your due diligence on this stuff, and talk to references. And by the way, not just the references they give you, right? They're going to give you some, companies are going to sing your praises. I mean, it's that's the not the easy part, but it's the it's easy to take their references, but go find some companies that have worked with this firm that maybe they didn't tell you about. Talk to your peers, use our forum to ask, hey, who's worked with this firm before, or these set of firms. Work with before you work with officially. This, Andy, that's your recommendation. What the heck did you mean there?
Take on a project, do something small. You don't have to boil the ocean here, but do something so you get behind the curtain and see how they actually operate. This is the culture part because it's like a job. You're not going to really know what it's like in a new role. Despite how many people you meet, you're just not going to know until you actually work there. And given how much is at stake here, just do something with these guys. Do it with a couple of them. Give them small projects, see how they operate. It
Mhm.
could turn out, and I've had many companies tell me this before, they put on a great show. And then when we got to know them better, didn't like them as much. Other people said, hey, they made a bad first impression. But when we started working with them, we realized that was an aberration and they were actually much better. So it's the only way you're going to know somebody is by knowing them, and you got to work together,
Well, and
which
I
is
think you also need to meet the team or talk to the team or understand who exactly you're working with, because sometimes the front end sales team is not who you're going to end up working with. Go
No,
ahead.
that's a really good point too. This is one that I know I'm a big believer in, and I've learned this over my lifetime: is choose project management leads on both sides. Everybody says, "Hey, we'll get together and I'll make it work," and then they don't dedicate a resource to it. You don't dedicate a resource to it, and then this is where it all falls apart because everybody has the best of intentions. They check everything else on the list. Everything is fine, but you can't actually make it work. You just don't. Nobody's a dedicated resource, and there's got to be a dedicated resource. Otherwise, people just go off and do something else. And then the last one is decide how you're going to handle conflict and disagreement. And you said, and unanticipated scope changes. This is something that is really worth talking about in advance. This is an interesting concept from like team building, where you make a charter, for example, and you decide, most importantly, what are we going to do when we disagree?
Right.
Nobody talks about this stuff, but that's another way to get to know someone. And if the partner says, well, when we disagree, you guys win. It's like, well, wait a minute, what if we're wrong? Or they say, well, if we disagree, since we're closer to it, we win. Wait a minute, I'm not sure I agree with that. So this is the kind of stuff that you should work out in advance. And then when you do run into a disagreement, you can refer to that and say, okay, this is the process we're going to use. But you've got probably the scope change problem, right?
Yeah. Well, you need to ask for cases. What happened in your couple projects? Give me examples of how you handled it when things went wrong, when you came across things that you didn't anticipate, because you can't anticipate everything in these projects. They're too complicated. So, that's a really important one. Again, it ties, I think, back to the cultural issue. All right. So it's been a rich discussion today, Andy. We got a couple quick announcements we want to make. First, our Nexus program continues to grow. We announced this 2 months ago at our summit. This program is designed for B2B executives, and it provides expert advice exclusively and only around B2B e-commerce for folks trying to make critical decisions in their business. We have a panel of seasoned experts that are available to you, as well as our overall network. We will match you with people and create discussions and one-on-one discussions, as well as group, to talk to you about some of these key issues and help you avoid mistakes, help you to advance your business. You can ask us anything. It is a paid service, and it's a subscription basis. So if you're interested, go to our website, masterbdb.com, and look for Nexus, and you can learn more or reach out to Andy and I. We also have our forum, which is continuing to grow every day. Lots of conversations every day happening there. Go to masterb2b.com forum. That's a free practitioner-only network online community just on our website, masterb2b.com. And finally, I want to remind everyone that our Friday 15 is available via podcast, and you can listen to us anytime you want to, just maybe not in the shower because you might explode. And please give us a rating or review, only if you like us. Andy, any final words of advice for the world here before we wrap for this week?
I do have something this week, which is on this partner thing. I dug up a quote from Girish Sahukar. He used to be at Don Foods. He's now with a vendor, but I love this quote. I don't think I've ever actually shared it publicly. He said, if you pick a bad platform and a good partner, odds are your partner will be able to overcome the platform issues. However, if you pick a good platform and a bad partner, odds are that both will fail. And I think that does kind of capture it. I'm not sure everybody agrees with that, but I think that does capture the essence of this debate.
Yep. You just have to change your partner, but in that case, but yes, it's, I agree with him. Well, good stuff, guys. We'll see you next week on our next Friday 15. Thanks for joining. Andy, have a great weekend.